So I'll be honest, man, I'm not really big on SmackDown moving to 3 hours. Look, you're talking to a guy who loves wrestling. You're talking to a guy who a few times in his life has binged long series of episodes of wrestling shows from various companies just to learn about it. I love wrestling. However, I don't know how I feel about SmackDown going to 3 hours. Raw being 3 hours, I think, already hurt it. I know that it's been a long time since 2012 that Raw was 3 hours, but I can't help but feel like the show was much better when it was just 2 hours and you had the 3 hour Raws as special occasions like the draft and certain anniversary episodes, things like that. When everything became 3 hours, especially during the Vince McMahon era, things would just drag out, the undercard would gobble up time, and it just wouldn't work. Now, I think the Triple H era has managed those 3 hours a lot better. I think that the 3 hour Raws we've gotten in the past few years have been better because really the characters are over and the storylines are working. So when things are like that, you can make mistakes. You can have a long 3 hour Raw that still feels enjoyable because you got at least two or three really good segments out of it. If you go back and watch some of those Vince McMahon Raws, like from 2017, 2018, 2019, and really during the pandemic, I mean, that show was unwatchable and just boring. And it just, the 3 hour era, I can think of a handful of great 3 hour Raws, but when it comes to the 2 hour Raws, there's only a handful of truly bad episodes. There's always been some boring episodes here and there, but the 2 hour era for the most part worked better. In fact, one of the stories that I remember hearing a long time ago is that Vince McMahon himself said that you should be able to get everything you need done and promoted and get all your angles and storylines and matches done in 90 minutes. If you cut out the commercials, a 2 hour Raw is about 90 minutes, not including an overrun. But with Raw going to Netflix, they're going to be at 3 hours again. But now SmackDown. SmackDown to me, again, always worked better as a 2 hour episode unless there was a reason for it to go 3 hours, like a special episode. But those were also few and far between. And Raw was the one that really did 3 hour episodes much more than SmackDown. That's probably because SmackDown for a long time was on syndication. Remember, it was on UPN at one time, it was on the CW, it's been on a lot of network television channels. And so when you have a show like that, bending the rules and having specials is a bit harder. Obviously, it went to USA at one point on Tuesdays. Then it went to, I forgot where else it went. Obviously, it was on Fox. The point is that the reason why 3 hour Raws and 3 hour SmackDowns are bad is because I just don't want to spend another hour of my week watching modern wrestling. Again, if I'm in the mood for it, like if I want to binge wrestling, I will do it for 6 hours, 7 hours straight, right? But I get to pick it. It's on my terms. If I'm watching new wrestling, I might not be in the mood to be up for 3 hours. And these new championships that they're adding, the women's intercontinental and women's US titles, those are supposed to be there because of the expansion for SmackDown to get the extra hour. So they have a new title to kind of be used in a way as like a TV title, even though it'll be on pay-per-views, but a title that can be defended during that extra hour. It just feels like a lot, and it's proven historically that 3 hour Raws, even the Triple H ones, sometimes fade. Sometimes, the good stuff is only in the opening segment. So, just being real with you, man, a 3 hour SmackDown also, I know they have a lot of stars right now. You got Roman and Cody as the top two faces. You've got the solo thing going on. You've got Kevin Owens as the other top heel. LA Knight's on that show. They have plenty of star power. Plenty of star power. And I always thought it was better if one show was longer than the other. I mean, to be honest, if Raw was 2.5 hours and SmackDown was 2.5 hours, I think I'd rather have that than both shows be 3 hours. You're going to end up having a lot of filler. You're going to end up having a lot of matches and storylines that don't matter. And when you have enough of those, they start to become annoying. As much as I like R-Truth and Akira Tozawa, I don't really want to see them every single week. I like how R-Truth has only been around, once every 2 or 3 weeks. He's not on every episode of Raw, especially in this 2 hour era. You can keep your comedy acts. You don't want to get rid of them necessarily, but you don't have to use them every single week. But if you have that extra hour, as a booker, as a person producing television, Triple H, Bruce Pritchard, and all the guys, the whole staff at WWE, Lee Fitting would be included in that. They would have to figure out how to fill that extra hour, and it's just an extra hour of writing. I mean, what can you do special or different with an extra hour? They're not doing anything like that. They're not doing like an hour long pre show. They tried doing something like that in the early days of the WWE network. Remember those? Those didn't work either. I think wrestling fans are fine with 2 or 3 hour TV shows for the most part. I still think more of them like the shorter shows. Everyone I've talked to does not want SmackDown to go 3 hours. I don't know a single fan. And I'm sure they're out there, and I'm sure some will comment on this video, but I don't know a single wrestling fan who actually wants a 3 hour SmackDown. I'm serious, man. And I know damn well a 3 hour Dynamite would melt my brain. I mean, that would just melt my brain. And by the way, I kept my promise. I have not watched Dynamite since I made that video that triggered all the AEW fans with that horrible episode they had about a month ago or so. I don't care about the Continental Classic. I don't care about any of their storylines right now at all. Even the Tony Storm, Mariah May one's not doing it for me. But I kept my word. Just imagine if that show were longer. And there's supposed to be another AEW show coming, Shockwave. And again, I don't mind variety wrestling, different types of wrestling, different wrestling companies. But if WWE's cooking and you've only got a certain number of hours in the day, I think some folks are going to pick to watch the 3 hour SmackDown over watching something like TNA, who's really doing their best to be a little bit different from AEW in many ways, in positive ways if you ask me, or even AEW themselves. And I do like watching some international too. So, it's going to be another hour. And on Friday night, what I used to do is I used to watch SmackDown, and then I put on an episode of the old ECW show from the 90s, the original ECW, and me and my friends would watch it, and it was a fun ass time. We had a good time. We would spend so much time laughing and just enjoying the wacky stories and how awesome it was. And so now I'm going to have to do that later until possibly past midnight. I don't know, man. Sometimes these companies really do get greedy, and they think more about lining their pockets up because they're obviously going to get paid well for that extra hour. Look what happened when Raw went to 3 hours. I mean, that pay grade went up. So, but they also got to think about the fans' experience too. I know Friday night's probably better than Monday night when it comes to workload for people, but people are also tired on Fridays from the week. It happens. So again, it's practical, I know, but SmackDown should not go to 3 hours. It's going to happen. It's already official. January 3rd, SmackDown, I think it is going to be the first one. And guess what? January 3rd is SmackDown. That night, 3 hour SmackDown, that night is Wrestle Kingdom. The next night is Wrestle Dynasty, and I know I have to stream that day on the Geekdom 101 YouTube channel. Then there's the Raw premiere. Oh my God, another weekend of not having time. I mean, I'll do the best I can, but wild weekend coming at the very beginning of 2025. So that's my video. That's all I have to say. See you next time.